Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, and wrestling's premier photographer, Dr. Mike Lano. And when you want to have a short list of the people that I've wanted to get on the show since we started 5 years ago, it might be this man who is, I think, the most popular and most successful referee in Northern California history. I am talking about one Sparkey Ballard. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me on the Coast to Coast, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yes. So
one of the most successful referees in the country.
I would agree.
Let's add that in.
I can say this about you, Sparkey. You're one of the most liked people in the Northern California wrestling scene. And so, it's really a pleasure to have you on. I mean, you would have to go far and wide to find somebody to say a negative word about the work that you've done in the ring, the person that you are outside the ring and in the locker room. And you've been a person that's united many different wrestling personalities in the federation that you ran. And so I want to know, how exactly did you get started in professional wrestling?
Well, I went to the APW boot camp in Hayward, California. I started training by 2007 and honed my craft there from Tom Castor, JJ Perez, Dana Lee, Larry Blackwell, Primetime, Zach Reeb. They all definitely had a lot of.
Well, you were with the American Dragon, right? Who
there when I started.
No, that was a little before, because remember, Danielson came in 2001 for our King of the Indies in Vallejo, the 2-night thing, which begat Ring of Honor and evolved everything that came out of there, like Rob Feinstein and the other guy for Ring of Honor who ran it when Rob had to depart, who's now pretty much a scout with WWE. Everything came out of that APW. Were you there though? So that's, I think, what Russ is asking, Spark. Were you there when Daniels?
No, I wasn't. That was a little bit before my time.
Came into wrestling.
Okay, so you trained with a lot of other guys who've been big stars and have gone on and done a lot of stuff too. So I know that.
But Melissa, and you were there too when Sarah D'Amato was. Oh God, what did Roland gave her some name? I forget the work
Nikki,
name that she had.
Nikki.
Yeah, and then she, of course, left. It was, it paralleled, Sparky. I think you and I had this conversation. It paralleled what Misawa did with Noah. He basically took everybody except for like one or two talents from All Japan. Baba's giant. When Baba died, and his wife, who was combative with talent, basically the late Mitsuharu Misawa took everybody, minus, I think Kawada was the only one so Kawada stayed with Mrs. Baba in All Japan, and then Misawa formed Noah, and then Iron forms almost the same thing. They leave, en masse, including office talent and some refs from APW to form Iron.
And
that was in your group.
Iron was closed by the time I even started training. So.
Okay, so
did you break in wanting to be a wrestler though? I don't know if Russ was going to ask that. Did you try initially to become a wrestler, or you goal set on reffing?
My goal was 100% reffing.
Wow.
And why is that? Why did you want to always be a ref?
I liked well, for one, I started training when I was 29. So I was a little bit later on in my years. I wanted to be in the ring and be close to the fire, but not have to feel the burn of all the bumps and moves that you would have to take to become a successful wrestler. I knew that if I just started to train to be a referee, I knew I could be a really, really good referee, and I liked the theatrics. I liked kind of the supporting role where the focus and spotlight necessarily wasn't on me, but on enhancing what the guys were doing. And so it was just a role that definitely inspired me to be able to be on the other side of the guardrail. And yeah, so that's definitely one of the reasons why I decided to become a referee instead of a wrestler.
But where did your love of wrestling come from?
Well, like what match or period of wrestling time made you a fan?
Well, when I was younger, my grandmother would, when I'd stay with her for the summer, she would take me down to the video, and, seeing some of the Survivor Series and Royal Rumbles and the larger characters of life. I decided, hey, I want to rent that. So she would rent them for me, and that was kind of like the spark that got me into wrestling later on. I kind of fell out of it when I was a little bit older, but my younger brother, Matt, he started getting into it during like the Attitude Era. And so my brother Matt's about 10 years younger than me. And then I have another brother, Luke, who has Down syndrome, and he's about 3 years younger than I am. And it was just something that we were all able to bond and have in common. So we would go out to some of the wrestling shows. My dad knew that we were into wrestling, and he bought us tickets to go to see APW at Terra Nova around 2000.
Oh my gosh.
So that was kind of like
I managed that match, right?
I'm pretty good.
yeah. I didn't me and Vinny take on Supernova? I
believe so, yeah.
That was the best super kick I ever got, and I sold it like $1 million. So I remember that.
That was the one that Crash, Leprechaun, Aaron O'Grady, Mike Lockwood was in the back, and I think all WWE allowed it. Well, it was WWF still allowed him to do was maybe cut a promo in the ring. He wasn't able to wrestle on that show. Was that the one also where Jim Barnett was backstage with Meltzer and me?
That I don't remember.
That had to have been the Terra Nova show. Yeah, they didn't introduce. I don't know why Roland didn't have Jim Barnett, who was like the Godfather. He was the one that changed the course of Tide in getting Vince, along with Jerry and Jack Briscoe, to vote the shares to Vince. So he was able to take over and create Black Saturday, where WWF crappy programming took over from Georgia Championship Wrestling, that hour segment, for a whole year. And that turned the tide of the wrestling business. This Jim Barnett guy, who had previously promoted Indiana, Ohio, and of course the glory days of Australia in the early 70s, when Mark Lewin and the Sheik and Abdul the Butcher and King Curtis and Killer Carl Cox and Dick Murdoch and Bay Area natives, Ray Stevens and Pepper Gomez, were all wrestling, right in Australia. It was incredible, the power that this guy had, Jim Barnett.
So continue on. You saw the match in.
Yeah, so like going to, a WWE and being in an arena and being compared to going to the APW show in a gymnasium, like you didn't feel like you were watching a show. You kind of felt like you were a part of the show, even as a fan, because, you could interact with the wrestlers. You'd yell at them, they'd turn around and kind of give you more of that like intimate experience. And it was just like, wow, it was such an amazing experience. It was I remember Max Justice came out, and we were like, whoa, that guy's big. And then Dalip Singh came out, and we were like, whoa, that guy is really big, So like seeing the Ballards with cheerleader Melissa, Flyboy Jardy France, Shane Dynasty,
and Buddy Sotelo.
And Buddy Sotelo, of course, just all these characters that were larger than life, and I was like, wow, this is something like this is even better than going to WWE.
I think that the main event wasn't the main event. Mark Smith, the Super Destroyer 2000 against Donovan Morgan for the APW Internet title.
Yeah,
that was one of the best matches I had with Mark Smith too. I can say another thing about the Terra Nova crowd. They were totally insane. They were just crazy. And it's the only place I've ever had stuff thrown at me. You guys threw ice and change and batteries at me and Vinny as we were coming down to the ring. It was pretty wild.
I wasn't one of those throwing of things, but I definitely enjoyed the atmosphere and the energy that APW brought. I think they did about like 2, 3 shows there that I went to, and then it kind of fell off. That was kind of when the Iron school started coming up, and they weren't doing shows there as much anymore. And then I became friends with Marcus Mack, who was living in my hometown, and he kept telling me about the Gym Wars. Kept telling me, "Hey, man, you got to check this out." And then I finally went to Halloween Hell of 2006, I believe, and they had this guy Jason X there, and I just remember like because you how small the garage was. There was the one side that was like the war zone, and the guys would get thrown out of the ring, and then they're grabbing the chair that you were sitting in and blasting the guy right in front of you, and it was just like whoa. And then I was like really hooked, and I didn't miss a show point until I actually joined the boot camp. I vividly remember Tom Castor coming out to the ring, kind of like after intermission, basically putting over the school that, not only do we train wrestlers, but we also train referees. So if you ever had the dream of becoming a referee, this is the place to do it. So I had talked to Marcus Mack and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about, doing this referee thing. And he was like, yeah, man, you should. Because at the time he was just helping out with Gorilla and doing commentary, I think, at the time. And so I had like this little pamphlet that said like 10% off the boot camp. And so I went and I talked to Roland for the camp coming up in that July of 2007. And I was like, hey, like I'm interested in doing this. And he's like, well, since you got a coupon and you're Marcus Mack's friend, and then I decided to just pay all at one time because I didn't want to deal with the payment plan thing. And he was like, yeah, I think we can get you down to a good rate. And so then I went ahead and paid it and started my training. And I trained there for about 8 months, basically going through the boot camp hell week, learning how to do my bumps inside the ring and getting thrown outside the ring. And it was definitely, I started with Jody Christofferson. He was in my class. And at the end of our 6 months, me and him were the only two left out of our camp.
Wow.
That actually made it.
Wow.
Yeah, so like when Jody was learning how to wrestle, Dana Lee would get in and he'd be like, all right, Jody, I'm going to do the move to you and show you how to do it. And then I'm going to have Sparky get in here and then you're going to do the move to him.
Because you're the only one that could do it to.
I was the only one. I was the only one still there with him. So I became a Jody bump buddy.
Spark, let me ask you 2 questions that I actually have never asked you before is how and when did you get smartened up, and were you smartened up prior to taking all the ref course? And then I've got a second follow-up question, but how and who did like Marcus smarten you up, or were you smartened up even before you and Marcus talked about stuff?
What about like how finishes and matches are put together?
Yeah, because some folks would come to boot camp, like when I dragged Icebox there, and I'd known him from roller derby, and he kept begging me to take him and introduce him to Roland, and later at times I regretted that. But I'll make that short. But he wasn't smartened up whatsoever. He didn't know, which was weird because roller derby is basically like wrestling in terms of being worked and finishes and whatnot, but they're going at high speed on skates. So, but it's like a sister sport, even though they have their own carny. The heels are red shirts, the baby faces are white shirts. So very similar like to the 1900s at shows and carnival shows and traveling circuses where wrestling got its roots. But how did you get smartened, or did you and your brothers just figure it out, or what happened?
I mean, I went into training kind of knowing that, the referee was kind of, in theory, like along for the ride and kind of knew where point A and point B were going to end up. But I would say when I was training there, I vividly remember this one match that had it was Dana Lee and Brian Cage versus Teddy Hart and
Yeah.
and they were doing like an angle with Gary Yap from Epic War,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
hated Gary because he was such a good, like, heel promoter manager type guy, and they put on an amazing match, and you just felt, and I remember that at the end, I believe like Gary Yap ended up getting bloodied and stuff, and bled all over the canvas and upset.
I remember it.
So after the show, because I was never, when you're a student, you're not let in the back. So you're not kind of seeing the interactions with people putting stuff together. And I remember at the end of every show, we'd put the chairs away, we'd clean the bathrooms, we were emptying the trash. And I remember going into the locker room to go grab one of the trash cans, and all four of those guys were sitting rewatching the match that they had just had, and basically going like, "Oh man, that was great. That didn't, this and that," and basically kind of having like that friendly banter. But like when you were just watching it from the show standpoint, you're like, "Wow, these guys really hate each other," But then, seeing that in the back made you go like, "Oh wow, like everything is cool. Like everybody is, friends." So it kind of like, tore a little bit of that wall down for me then. Another like fun story is I went to a big time wrestling show that Kurt White put on in Redwood City, and me and my brother Luke would normally, even before I started training, we would wear our referee shirts to the show, just as just to support the refs, and because it was just kind of like a little bit of a dream that I had previously. And that day, my brother wore his referee shirt, and I forgot mine. And I remember Kurt White, he was funny guy. He's like, "Oh, you guys hear John Cena's coming here tonight?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, right," But we went in, and they had a wrestler named Short Sleeve Samson.
Yeah.
And, he and this other wrestler, Pitbull Patterson, and we went up and we were just talking to him, and like Short Sleeve had done some extra work as pretending to be Kurt Angle and some stuff at TNA, and so we were just chopping it up with him, and with my brother having Down syndrome, like I think like Short Sleeve kind of had a soft spot for him, for someone who deals with disabilities in life, and he was kind of joking around, like he's like, "Oh, you got your ref shirt on, you get to ref my match tonight?" And he was like, yeah, and he's like, "Oh, that's great, man." So we had a really talk with Short Sleeve, and so I was like, "All right, Luke, well, let's go find where we're gonna go sit." And as we're like standing there searching, like Short Sleeve comes, kind of tugs on my sleeve, and he was like, "Hey, I got a question for you." And I was like, "Oh yeah, what's that?" And he's like, "You think your brother would like to ref part of my match?" And I was like, "Wow, like how is that even possible?" You know what I mean? And he was like, I said, "Well, yeah, absolutely, he would love to, And he's like, "All right, well, let me talk to the promoter, my opponent, and the ref, and I'll get back to you to find out if I could even make this happen." So I was just like, "Wow, that's kind of crazy, like." So he back to me and he says, "Hey, man, everything's all good. I'll give you the signal when to send your brother in." So I was like, "Okay," but I never got like smartened up on like what the signal was. So we're sitting in the bleachers, and I'm going over with my brother. "All right, now when he gets the pin, you got to 1, 2, 3 it for him, So at some point, Short Sleeve's on the top rope, and I think he gave a signal, but I wasn't sure, and I wasn't about to just send my brother in like without like really knowing. And then Pitbull Patterson ends up hitting a move, puts his little feet on the ropes, and he pinned Short Sleeve Samson, and the match was over. And I was just like, oh, my heart sank, and I go, "Oh man, I missed the signal." And then Short Sleeve gets up, and I was like, "No, Duke, you gotta let the ref know. You gotta reverse the decision. You gotta go in there." So my brother starts going up the steps, and he looks back at me like, "Should I be doing this?" And I'm like, "Go, go." And Short Sleeve grabbed Ronnie Washington, Mark Harris, and he shit cans him out of the ring. And my brother gets in the ring. He hits Pitbull with a bulldog, and then does the worm like Scott Hollywood, and then he goes ahead and he pins Pitbull, and my brother counted the 3 count, and I think I was like more excited for that moment than my brother was, just because
Wow.
it inspired me to be like, wow, here's my brother, who has Down syndrome, and he's in the ring with a referee shirt on, counting the 3 count. And I was just like, a lot of ours growing up was him emulating and wanting to do the things that I have done, and like that was like definitely a moment in my life where I was like, I was looking up to him because I was like, man, he got to do what I want to do, So
That's a wonderful story. That's a wonderful story.
inspirational part of me that made me think like.
Let me ask Russ my second question. That's wonderful for him and for you. I don't know if you watch ref tapes, but I've written about you as being as physical and as polished and professional as the original Red Shoes Johnny Dugan, who, of course, the New Japan ref, even though he says he didn't know who Red Shoes Dugan was, that's bullshit, because he watched tapes, he's wearing all of the boots and the stuff that Red Shoes Dugan, who was a retired wrestler in the 40s and 50s, and he was a ref for like 30 some odd years based out of LA. Baba and Inoki brought him into Japan a number of times. He even refed on some Tri-WF shows. You were so polished as a ref, and you got that quickly. And I know we're jumping ahead of like the Ballard twins, who I got to see the Ballards with Melissa managing them down at Bassman's UPW before they ever even came up and started working for APW. But the skills that you had become not only the most well liked and most professional, but really the most athletic ref that we were all proud of. How did you do that so quickly? Were you watching tapes of like other refs like Dick Kroll, Dick Worley, all these great referees in history? The refs in Georgia Championship Wrestling who were very physical, and like Red Shoes Dugan could fly, around the ring when it was time to count the pin.
Like I credit like AJ Perez. His manner and move the ring as Mr. Wrestling 4 during his time. Like he, watching him with his movements and stuff. Prime time I remember I was counting, and he's like, you got to reach, high and big. I think it was just, keeping my mouth shut, my eyes open and ears like a sponge, just, just training as much as I possibly could, learning from my mistakes in practice matches, because I trained for about 8 months before I had my spot. And I don't necessarily feel like it was because I wasn't ready. I think it was just because we had 3 other referees at the time. But Matt Carlos was one of the referees, but he was transitioning to wrestler. There was this other referee, Mario Camacho, but he ended up quitting. And then there was Tom Castor. So Mario quit, and that became a wrestler. Then it became like me and Tom. And so I ended up getting a lot of experience. I think a lot of it was just too, was like, I put a lot of sweat and tears, if you will, in the ring of, earning my spot at the garage. And, but as soon as I got to wet my feet and got through my first show, it made me think like, okay, I did it. I'm at my home promotion, but like, how do I get out of here? How do I go and expand? Because during the time of training, as many wrestling shows as I could to like watch, what the referees were doing, seeing, what different wrestlers were out there, seeing the different platforms that all these different promotions had to offer. And, so then it was just a matter of like, getting out there. Jardy France, vouched for me to get on Butch's WFC Troop Slam show. I think it was at Santa Clara. From there, I talked to Vinny Massaro and got on the CCW, and I believe that's where I met Buddy. Talked to Billy Blade, who pointed me in the direction of Mike Rain for NAW. NAW had so many wrestlers, from Sir Samurai, Alexis Drevko, Bobby Hart, Rick Luxury, all these guys. And from there, most of these wrestlers were also running their own promotions. And I feel like I got in at a good time where there wasn't a lot of committed traveling referees, and I was willing to do the travel to get the experience. So at the peak of on 2-3 shows every single weekend. So I was getting dog years of experience really quickly, and also kind of being in different platforms that had different, some were more traditional, some were a little more edgier with some hardcore and outside unique stipulations, and each one was a good challenge for me to really kind of hone the craft, kind of well round me to be able to find the line of doing too much or not enough.
Did you come down to XPW when Modest and Donovan came down and Max? I can't remember. I was thinking you did.
Modest and Donovan weren't even at the garage during the time.
Oh, right.
There, I got to work with Modest a lot later on when he came back, and that was a really great experience for me to get to work with Modest. A lot of it was at SPW and a couple other places, because I'd heard so much about him. I'd seen him wrestle in the earlier years, but to get a chance to share the ring with someone like that was a high honor for me to get to kind of experience that past history of what I had heard about, and now getting a chance to get in the ring and work with him.
Well, I wanted to ask you about what would you consider is your favorite match to have reffed, and also what do you think is your most impressive high spot that you've taken?
There's been a few as far as high spots, at Pro Wrestling Revolution, I get to do a La Migra gimmick where I'm a heel referee that's a part of the Border Patrol, and I've had some real bangers with being a crooked ref with JR Kratos, also Dave Dutra and Wise Guy, but 2 matches that we had in San Francisco at the John O'Connell High School was JR Kratos versus Jacob Fatu, and it was getting more involved. We also did 2 different matches with La Parca, one in San Francisco and one in Stockton, and they were definitely a lot more physically involved. Because I was a heel referee, I was hitting La Parca with a belt, but on end of just the physicality where I was basically borderline a wrestler in the match on top of reffing it. Those with Jacob and La Parca versus Kratos, those were definitely some of the most memorable matches that I've had, just because of the physicality that I had to exert myself into, not only playing the referee role, but also kind of doing a wrestler role. I've actually had 2 matches. One was with Big Ugly, and the other match was versus Rick Luxury. The match with Big Ugly was quite a fun one. Samurai wanted to face him at the anniversary show. Big Ugly kept dodging him. Big Ugly cuts a promo saying, "Hey, if Samurai wants to face me, if the first man who comes out from the back, can beat me, then I'll face him at the show." So he says, "So get me out a referee so we could start the match." All right. So I come out to go ref it, and I go to start checking him, and he goes, "Whoa, look at that. Looks like Sparky Ballard is the guy with the big enough balls to face the Big Ugly. So get us out a referee and let's start this thing." And I was like, "What?" And basically beat the crap out of me for about 5 minutes or so. And then Sir Samurai's valet's music hit, which kind of, as he had me in a sleeper hold and my hand was getting held up for the 3rd drop, he pushes me to the side, tells Toby to go get her out of there. Sir Samurai slides in the back, hits Ugly over the head, and then throws my limp carcass on top of him as Toby turns around and counts 1, 2, 3. So Ugly had to face Samurai at the anniversary show.
You got to win against Big Ugly.
I did.
That's,
and then,
hey, I'd take it. That's good. That's a good deal. Hold on just a sec. We lost Lano for just a second here. Well, while we're waiting for Mike to call back in, I also wanted to just sort of ask you about, like, you've seen the movie, I assume, The Peanut Butter Falcon.
I did.
Yes, and given your family situation, what were your thoughts about that movie?
Yeah, I liked it. The guy supported it, the kid's dreaming to, following his dream of becoming a pro wrestler, yeah, it was a feel good movie that I definitely was able to somewhat relate to.
Did your brother watch it?
I don't know if he did.
Well, maybe for the holidays when you get together with him. Are you getting together with your family for the holidays, your brothers?
Yeah.
That's great. They still live in Northern California?
And my brother still lives in town, so I still see him often.
That's good. But yeah, I was also thinking about, do you reflect back on all the amazing talent that you worked with and kind of in some ways you're amazed? I mean, one name you didn't mention that I know you worked extensively with was Timothy Thatcher.
Yeah. When I had a Timothy Thatcher match, I knew I was in for some work because his submission holds and trying to get in the right position for, making sure a foot wasn't touching the rope or shoulders weren't being held down or wherever the action went, I knew I was in. I knew I was in for some work when I repped the Timothy Thatcher match, but in a good way. One of the highlight ones was the headlock match that him and Oliver John had, where they literally just worked a headlock for the whole match, just to see if they could do it. And it's definitely one for people to go back and watch, because those guys, he never forgot where it hurt. He always focused on a body part. His facial expressions were second to none. And he just brought the intensity and the realism to everything that he did. And, it just makes the job easier to get him from point A to point B, because you're believing everything too,
Well, I think that always meant a lot to you, was the quality of the matches that you were reffing. I think that it mattered to you because you were part of it. You wanted to make sure that, it all went well. And people don't really understand the ref's role in maintaining order in the match and making sure that it progresses the right way, and also calling it when a guy is hurt and being, aware of what's going on in the ring to know if you have to call it early. Can you tell me any matches you can think of where you had to call it early because the guy was hurt in the ring?
There was definitely some scary situations. I remember an APW show where Matt Cross was, I believe he was facing Timothy Thatcher, and he went to go do a fake dive out where he kind of hooks his top arms and puts his neck under the top rope to kind of springboard himself back. But when he did that, it actually snapped the rope, and he went tumbling head first to the outside. So I had to go out and go check on him. I remember another one at Icebox's show where it was Super Beast versus Mecha Wolf, and Super Beast caught Mecha Wolf, and Super Beast did something really bad to I think his quad or something on his leg, and I'm just trying to relay to okay, well, what do you want? What are we doing? You know what I mean? Do we just want to call it? Do we want to push through it? What do you want me to tell your opponent? And luckily for Matt Cross's situation, he just needed a minute to kind of catch his bearings, but he was okay. Super Beast, he really did hurt his leg pretty bad, but there's that wrestler's pride of pushing through, when you're hurt to just get to the finish line. it always sucks when, like you get hurt so bad that, like you can't have at least a believable finish to the match beyond just the actual believability that someone got hurt. I do remember there was a funny story, like when Cafu at APW, he was having his last match before he went to WWE. And he said that in his last match, he wanted to face his trainer, Robert Thompson, the Brown Bomber. And I remember he gets Cafu out of the ring, and he goes to go do a dive out, and he was doing a tope, and Cafu grabbed a chair, and as he went head first to dive out of the ring, he clear on blasts him right in his head, and he just drops.
Ooh.
Everyone was like, "Oh snap!" Gabe Ramirez came out, Roland, Tom Kazza, he kind of gets himself back in the ring. They're like, "Hey, don't worry about the match." Because Cafu's thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I just hurt my last match on, going to the Fed," and crowd completely silenced. Cafu goes to, help Bomber up, and then Bomber out of nowhere hits him with the cutter, starts doing a little shooky dance.
It must work.
Goes and pins him for the win, and I was like, wow, like they had everybody going that, he was like seriously injured, and then the whole time it was just a work. So I remember another one was Matt Carlos when he was a referee. Chris Coleone threw him over the top rope, and he hit the ground pretty hard. And this was actually a show that my dad went to, and I was still a student at the time, or I hadn't debuted yet. And Matt Carlos's hands, it's all shaking, and my dad tells me, "Oh man, you guys better call 911. He's really messed up, And we're like, "Oh my god!" So we get Matt to the back, and as soon as we get through the curtain, he's like, "Oh, thanks guys." And I was like, "Oh, smack, okay." Here my dad is, as a fan, like telling me that, like, we need to call 911, and he had everyone believing that he was really messed up. And so we went during intermission. I went out, and my dad was like, "Oh, so how's that ref doing? Is he okay?" And I just leaned over to him and I said, "Dad, we like fans like you."
That's great. That's great. No, it's wonderful that you could go see that with your dad. Now let's talk a little bit about you moving on to Goldmine and what that was all about, because I was always very impressed what you accomplished there.
So when Roland passed away in November of 2013, the APW garage was like, and our boot camp program was like really in jeopardy of like, what's going to happen? Is this all just going to, end with Roland's passing? And I didn't want to see that, and Marcus Mack didn't want to see that. And so I got with Dylan Drake and I got with Matt Carlos, and I worked for a school district, and we had this one school that was like shut down, and basically they were leasing out different parts of the school to outside renters just to make some money off of a school that wasn't being in use. So previously they had like this multi-purpose room that during my work I'd be like, wow, this would be a really cool place to have a school at, and then when Roland passed away, it really motivated me to like try to continue on with what the APW standards and practices were, with our APW Bible and guys who had gone through, the boot camp themselves, and just kind of like getting a chance to like continue on the APW boot camp, so that legacy could live, on past Roland's passing. So within a matter of a couple months, I was able to, like in January 2014, I was able to get a lease on this multi-purpose room at the Odstad School in Pacifica. And basically with me, Matt, and Dylan, we basically started up continuing on the APW boot camp. So while they were training, I just kind of was like, getting some new students for us, and I was kind of like more the principal, and they were more of like the the teachers, and I had this vision where I wanted to create like a pro wrestling theater. And basically, since it was a multi-purpose room, it had a stage, and I built like this.
Castle Grayskull.
I wanted to cut it out to where it felt like you were walking into a gold mine. Because at the time, I had started Gold Rush Pro Wrestling in 2012, so I already kind of had like a branded. So we called it the Gold Mine, kind of like based off of the Gold Rush Pro Wrestling, and we were running the APW boot camp out of that place. And I was doing a lot of ring rentals and getting my students out there to meet promoters and to pay their dues, and just to kind of teach them the ropes of all the things that go into becoming a pro wrestler, as far as like that goes. And Dylan and Matt really focused on the training inside the ring, and I was more the focus of all the things outside of the ring, and basically created like a drawbridge with a skull. And I had an artist buddy, Hio Kim, who came in and really like brought my vision to life with all his paintings to kind of vibe. Got the theatrical lighting. I had Paul Adams helping me with all the production into things, getting everything like dialed in. And
Paul Adams or Paul White?
Paul Adams.
Oh, Paul Adams. Okay.
And basically we created a pro wrestling theater, and then we're able to start streaming a lot of our shows on YouTube live, which not a lot of other promotions in the area were doing at the time. And it was basically like a monthly show that we were doing. And, it gained a lot of like followers and stuff like from other areas. So like, even if they weren't local, they could still appreciate all the stuff we were doing. The one prideful thing that I have with running Gold Rush was our good continuity with storylines. I felt like we did a lot of really cool storylines with all the characters. I tried to make sure that everybody had a purpose. And
did you write the storylines?
Yeah, I did the booking and the promoting of it. I reffed for a while, and then later on, when I had enough other good referees, I kind of took a step back from being on the show just to kind of make sure that everything was running smoothly. But yeah, it was. We had a lot of good guys that came out of our boot camp. Like Thunder Rosa graduated from us. Starboy Charlie. Lucian Delight was a great manager. Long was a great referee. Manny Mars, Bryant, Ethan White, Onu, Joey Gonzo, Bruno Beretta. So many good ones. Idris Jackson, he was great. Yeah, we got to just do a lot of really cool things at the Gold Mine with running the NorCal Hall of Fame out of there. We were doing the Young Lions Cups out of there. We were doing our, monthly, just our own storyline shows. And yeah, it was just I look back on those times fondly. I really do miss the creative process. I mean, there's obviously a lot of stress that goes along with, promoting and running shows, but like, when you got to see like your vision kind of come to fruition, and getting to have people enjoy it not only in the building but beyond, it was just a really gratifying feeling. And seeing my students grow into like the characters and the performers that they were, and also like getting to go beyond just what we were doing at Gold Rush and going to other places like Johnny Rodito and Manny Mars. They went over and won tag team titles at another promotion with a gimmick that we came up with at our promotion. And it was just really cool to see that the work we had done at our spot was being used and utilized and appreciated by other promotions. So anytime my students went out and got new bookings, or had successful, opportunities that they seized, I felt like it was always a win for me too, because, knowing that they came in just, green, and then getting to see them flourish and what their dreams were was really was really good.
I think
really
that's
good
what makes you one of the most liked people in all of Northern California. I mean, as again, when you were with Goldmine, you drew from all sorts of feds and talent from everywhere, and there was really no politics. That's what I heard about your locker room, was that, you know, guys that normally were.
I got to work everywhere, and getting to work everywhere, I got to see, I got to, give opportunities to guys that I'd worked with at other places and give them a chance to, work at Gold Rush. And, like I would, some places are like, we only want you to, do things for us, or we don't like them. I never wanted my politics to ever play into, my students' opportunities. I felt like that would be very hypocritical considering how much I branched out from, APW and was accepted into all these other locker rooms. That I just wanted the same experience for all my students to, have a non-biased, approach on, opportunities that are out there. And I think they all did a great job in earning their spots. And, a lot of them would stay after and help break down the ring and or be there early to help set up, and always just brought like good attitude.
That with CCW, you always showed up early, helped set up, and you always broke stuff down afterwards. And, that was a lot of those matches were out in Central California, where it was like a 3-hour drive back to the Bay Area, and you always did it. I was always really impressed.
Yeah, that was a fun little time, getting to work in that little training center that they had out there.
Yeah, out in the middle of literally nowhere in Newman, California. But we did a lot of fun stuff, but we couldn't have done it all without your professionalism. And it's one thing that I always use the show for, is to thank the people that I worked with for all their professionalism. Well, I have a couple minutes left. Let me throw out a couple names for you, and you can just say what you think about them from the top of your head. First of all, a guy very dear to both of us, and that's Virgil Flynn. Why don't you give a few thoughts about, our departed friend?
Yep. Virgil he was a lot of fun. He always would try to come up to me in the beginning of his match to say something funny to me, to try to make me break character as far as keeping my seriousness. He was actually my Dynamite Division champion at Gold Rush. Virgil's smile and positivity was infectious to anybody that he got to work with. The only thing is like sometimes he would show up like really close to like bell time,
right? Bell
time, and it would stress me out a little bit. But
But he always put on a match with 100%.
So even though I was just like, all right, is he gonna get here in time? I never had a doubt in my mind that he was gonna put on a great Dynamite Division type match. I love the guy to death. I mean, he was the best.
And then I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about Tony Jones, who we lost earlier this year.
Tony Jones was definitely, the shooter, I loved talking to him. He gave me some, great support, advice. I really was honored to be able to host the NorCal Hall of Fame at the gold mine that we inducted him in. Just a great guy, I can't thank Tony enough for the support that he gave me during the times he came out to my events, and that I got to see him on shows.
Yeah, no, he was a guest on our show, and sadly, that's one of his last interviews before his untimely passing. And I miss the guy a lot too. I'm with you on that. So tell me, what's in the future for you, Sparky? What are your plans for the future?
I've been training some upcoming referees at West Coast Training Academy. I got Ref Guild, Jackie, been working with Tom and this other kid, Nick. So I'm excited to kind of, help mold them to be the best next up and coming referees. I feel like a big part of, wrestling is leaving it better than you found it. And sometimes that's just kind of like instilling the things that, made you successful, and, their time in pro wrestling will last beyond even mine. You know, West Coast has basically been my home promotion since the inception of it. I helped Scott, kind of get that ball rolling, and now he's kind of in a way taken over the school that I had, and with doing the APW boot camp. Now it's the West Coast Pro Academy. So it's just kind of evolution of, the boot camp that was started at APW. Vinny Massaro is one of our trainers, Aaron Solo, Starboy Charlie, and a couple others, Levi Shapiro. So, focusing on helping that brand, continue to be like top. I'm at Revolution. The normal refereeing that I get to do, that's a lot of fun, and I got some. I've been getting to do some stuff with Big Time Wrestling, kind of legacy that Kurt started for all those years, working with Lori and Taylor, and continuing on with what they've been doing with Big Time Wrestling, which is all I know. Down on them. Get to work with willingness to do a little bit hardcore. I like that. High caliber talent. Type. Yeah, I think after COVID, I
Well, I'm sorry to say, I think we're having a little bit of audio issues on my end. I'm not sure why, but you're cutting off a little bit there. And we're almost at the end of the hour, so I'd just like to see if we can get the audio to work, if you can let the fans know what your social media connections would be if they want to get a hold of you.
Just Facebook under Sparkey Ballard. That's pretty much it.
And what about West Coast Pro?
Yeah, West Coast Pro is on Facebook. They're also on Twitter. Don't necessarily know the handles off the top of my head, but I do know if you search them, we're not hard to find.
What's
we
the
have
next
stuff
big show? Yeah, what's your next big show?
Well, I got Big Time Wrestling on let's see, December 14th. Not So Silent Night. And then got West Coast Pro out in South San Francisco, January 10th, and definitely both shows that are worth the price of admission, if not more. So
I'd like to come out and see one of the shows, so hopefully I'll see you there sometime soon. Thank you so much for being on our show this week. It's been wonderful getting back in touch with you. I hope it's not another 15 to 20 years before we talk again, because you have so much to add. And if you have anything coming up or anything you want to promote, we really like to be able to help you because you're a friend of the show.
Well, I appreciate that, buddy. Thanks for having me on and giving me the time.
Thank you so much. Have a happy holiday season to you and your family.
All right, you too, buddy.
All right, good night, everyone.